This woman claimed she died for 2 minutes during childbirth and saw America's destruction through divine prophecy. Her journey from being a renowned atheist author to a messenger of God's warning will leave you questioning everything you believe. What she witnessed in those brief moments between life and death, a mysterious clock frozen at 11:59, her deceased husband leading dark forces, and her dying daughter's role in humanity's future changed her forever. Now, as she shares her testimony, her story becomes more than just another near-death experience. It's a mother's journey through loss, faith, and redemption. It's a warning about America's future wrapped in a personal tale of transformation. But most importantly, it's a message of hope for those who feel lost in their darkest moments. This is Rachel Williams' story, in her own words, about the day she died and the truth that brought her back. The day I died wasn't dramatic at all. It happened during what should have been the most beautiful moment of my life, giving birth to my second child. I remember the harsh fluorescent lights of the delivery room, the steady beep of monitors, and my daughter Sarah's small hand clutching mine. She wasn't supposed to be there, terminal illness or not, but she refused to leave her mommy alone. At 9 years old, she was already stronger than I'd ever been. "Push, Mrs. Williams," the doctor commanded, but something felt wrong. The room started spinning, the lights flickering like an old TV set. I heard Sarah's frightened voice, "Mommy," then the pain, not from labor but deep in my chest, like something was being torn apart. "We're losing her," someone shouted. "Code blue." The last thing I saw was Sarah's face, tears streaming down her pale cheeks, her small hand still gripping mine as nurses pulled her away. "Don't leave me like Daddy did," she whispered. Those words followed me into the darkness. They told me later my heart stopped for exactly 2 minutes. But time works differently on the other side. 2 minutes here was an eternity there. Long enough to see the end of everything I knew. Long enough to meet my dead husband wearing a black mask, leading forces of darkness. Long enough to witness my dying daughter grown up, leading survivors through flames. Long enough to see the clock of humanity frozen at 11:59 and understand why God let James die in that accident 3 years ago. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what I saw, what's coming, you need to know who I was before. Because the woman who died in that delivery room isn't the same one who came back. If this opening glimpse into my journey between life and death has touched your soul, I invite you to join our community of seekers and believers. Subscribe to witness more powerful testimonies that could change your perspective on faith, truth, and the eternal choice we all face. Before I became that woman who died and came back, I was Rachel Williams, New York Times best-selling author of God is Dead, Why Faith Fails Us. Oh, the irony. I made my career destroying people's faith, touring universities, debating religious scholars, and proudly calling myself America's most notorious atheist. My social media bio read rationalist, truth seeker, mythology debunker. I had 500,000 followers who loved watching me dismantle religious arguments with cold, hard logic. You see, I wasn't always this way. I grew up in a deeply religious household in small-town Georgia. My mother, Martha, was the kind of woman who saw God's hand in everything from a beautiful sunset to a parking spot at Walmart. She still leads the prayer group at First Baptist Church, still sends me daily Bible verses even though I blocked them all. "Rachel," she'd say, "someday you'll understand that running from God is like running from your own shadow. The harder you try, the more it follows." I met James in college. He was studying theoretical physics, I was in journalism, and we bonded over our shared disdain for primitive superstitions. We got married in a courthouse, much to my mother's horror. When Sarah was born, we agreed to raise her free from religious indoctrination. We were so proud, so certain we had it all figured out. Then came the accident. 3 years ago, James was driving home from the university where he taught. A drunk driver ran a red light. The police said he died instantly. I remember standing at his funeral, listening to people say he's in a better place and God has a plan. I wanted to scream. What God would take a brilliant scientist, a loving father, from his family? What divine plan required a little girl to grow up without her daddy? That's when I wrote the book. It was meant to be my manifesto against faith, my rational response to suffering. It became a sensation. I appeared on talk shows, gave TED Talks, became the voice of a new generation of atheists. Religion is humanity's oldest coping mechanism, I'd say, but we don't need fairy tales anymore. We need truth. The ultimate irony? The book tour was what paid for Sarah's treatments when she got sick. Stage 4 leukemia, they said, terminal. My perfectly logical world started crumbling. Science, my god of reason, couldn't save my little girl. Every treatment failed. Every experimental protocol ended in disappointment. I watched her getting weaker, her bright blue eyes just like James growing dimmer. The night before I went into labor with my second child, an unexpected pregnancy I almost terminated, I found Sarah kneeling by her bed. She was praying. My fierce little atheist, my mini-me, was talking to God. When I asked her why, she looked at me with those eyes that seemed too old for her face and said, "Because Daddy told me to." "Daddy's dead, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking. "He visits me in my dreams," she replied with complete certainty. "He says God isn't what you think, Mommy. He says you'll understand soon." I dismissed it as the hallucinations of a sick child. I was so blind, so stubbornly attached to my beliefs that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Even when the doctors said Sarah shouldn't survive another month, even when she kept getting stronger instead of weaker, I refused to see. That was who I was when I died on that delivery table. Dr. Rachel Williams, Ph.D., professional skeptic, grieving widow, mother of a dying child, champion of reason, enemy of faith. If only I'd known then what was waiting on the other side. If only I'd understood what James meant when he appeared in Sarah's dreams. If only I'd listened to my mother when she said, "Sometimes, Rachel, God has to break us completely before he can make us whole again." But I didn't know. I didn't understand. I didn't listen. And so I died, carrying my arrogance and anger with me into the darkness. The nurses called Sarah my little miracle while other terminal patients deteriorated. She seemed to draw strength from somewhere beyond medical explanation. The doctors were baffled. By all their calculations, she should have been gone months ago. Instead, she sat by my hospital bed every day, drawing pictures of angels and telling me about her conversations with Daddy. My second pregnancy wasn't planned. After James died, I'd sworn never to bring another child into this cruel, meaningless universe. But something stopped me from terminating it. Maybe it was Sarah's face lighting up at the news of becoming a big sister. Maybe it was my mother's quiet suggestion that God gives life when we need it most. I scoffed at her then, but now I wonder. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Severe complications, the doctor said. High risk. They wanted me to stay in bed, but I had book tours scheduled, speaking engagements. I was in the middle of writing my second book, The Death of Divinity: Why Religion Must End. My agent begged me not to cancel. My publisher threatened legal action. Only Sarah seemed unconcerned. "The baby will be fine, Mommy," she'd say, placing her small hand on my swollen belly. "She's special, just like me." I blamed the morphine when she started talking about strange things. She claimed James visited her every night now, telling her about what was coming. She drew pictures of cities burning, of stars falling from the sky, of a giant black tower rising from the ruins. But she always drew like two golden rays breaking through the darkness. My mother moved in with us during my last trimester. Despite our ideological warfare, she was still my mom. She cooked, cleaned, and took Sarah to her endless medical appointments. I caught them praying together sometimes, their heads bowed over Sarah's hospital bed. I should have been angry, but I was too tired to fight anymore. The night before I went into labor, I had a strange dream. I was standing in our backyard, but the sky was wrong, deep red and swirling with darkness. James stood before me, but his face was hidden behind a black mask. "It's time, Rachel," he said. "The foundation is crumbling. You need to see." I woke up crying, something I hadn't done since his funeral. Sarah was sitting by my bed, watching me with those ancient eyes in her young face. "Did you see him too?" she asked. "Did he tell you about the clock?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in that moment, looking at my dying daughter who refused to die, thinking of my unborn child who shouldn't have survived, remembering James' words in a dream that felt too real, my carefully constructed wall of skepticism began to crack. The contraction started an hour later. As they rushed me to the delivery room, Sarah grabbed my hand and whispered something that would haunt me during my journey through death. "Remember, Mommy, when you see the clock at 11:59, don't be afraid. That's when the light comes." But I was afraid. I was terrified. Because for the first time in years, I felt something I'd worked so hard to destroy in others: faith. Not belief that would come later, but faith. Raw, irrational, undeniable faith. that something bigger than my understanding was unfolding. As they wheeled me into delivery, my mother's words from years ago echoed in my mind. God doesn't break us because he's cruel, Rachel. He breaks us because sometimes that's the only way light can get in. I was about to discover just how right she was. The monitors started screaming first. 1 minute I was pushing, following the doctor's instructions. Sarah's small hand clutched tightly in mine. The next, chaos erupted. The sharp, steady beep of my heart monitor turned into one long, continuous tone. I remember thinking how strange it was that I could still hear it, even as the room began to fade. Blood pressure dropping, someone shouted. We're losing her. I tried to focus on Sarah's face, but my vision was blurring. She wasn't crying, though. That's what struck me. While nurses and doctors rushed around in panic, my 9-year-old terminal cancer patient of a daughter stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the growing darkness. It's okay, Mommy, she said, her voice crystal clear despite the chaos. This is what has to happen. Daddy said so. They tried to pull her away then, but she resisted with surprising strength. No, she shouted. I have to tell her. Mommy, remember what I said about the clock. When you see it at 11:59, that's when. The rest of her words were lost as something inside me lurched. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, not sharp like labor pains, but deep and fundamental, as if my very essence was being torn apart. I heard the doctor shouting for a crash cart, felt hands pressing on my chest, but it all seemed distant, unimportant. The fluorescent lights above me began to flicker, their harsh glare taking on an almost liquid quality. The sound in the room changed too, becoming muffled and distorted, like I was hearing everything underwater. I tried to speak, to tell them about the strange pressure building in my chest, but my lips wouldn't move. Then I saw him, James. Not in the room, but somehow superimposed over it, like a double exposure in a photograph. He was wearing that black mask Sarah had drawn so many times, but I knew it was him. His presence filled me with a mixture of love and terror I can't quite explain. It's time, Rachel, he said, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. You need to see. You need to understand. The pressure in my chest exploded into searing pain. I heard someone, probably me, scream. The room spun violently, colors blending and swirling together like paint in water. Through it all, I kept my eyes locked on Sarah's. She was speaking again, her lips moving in what looked like a prayer. My mother burst into the room, then I never knew how she got past hospital security. She took one look at the scene and started praying loudly, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, me dying in childbirth while my atheist daughter and religious mother prayed over my body, James watching from some impossible space between reality and whatever lay beyond. The new life inside me struggling to enter the world as my own life prepared to leave it. The pain peaked, and with it came a clarity I'd never experienced before. In that moment, suspended between life and death, I understood what Sarah had been trying to tell me. This wasn't just about me, or her, or even the baby. Something bigger was unfolding, something I'd spent my entire career denying. The last thing I heard was the doctor announcing the time of death, 11:59 p.m. The last thing I saw was Sarah smiling, not crying, but smiling as she whispered, "Now you'll see, Mommy. Now you'll understand." Then everything went black. But it wasn't the peaceful darkness of unconsciousness, or the final darkness of death. It was alive, pulsing, waiting, and somewhere in its depths, I heard a sound that would haunt me forever, the slow, deliberate ticking of a massive clock. My journey into death had begun, but unlike the rational, scientific non-existence I'd always preached about, this death had purpose. This death had direction. This death, I would soon learn, had been waiting for me. And somewhere in that living darkness, James was waiting too. The darkness wasn't empty. That was my first coherent thought after death, a realization that shattered everything I'd ever written or spoken about the great nothingness that awaited us. This darkness breathed. It moved. It had weight and substance, and most terrifyingly, purpose. I floated in it, formless yet somehow more aware than I'd ever been in life. The steady ticking grew louder, each beat resonating through whatever passed for my consciousness now. Time behaved strangely here, stretching and contracting like elastic. What felt like hours might have been seconds in the world I'd left behind. Then the whispers started. At first they were indistinct, like leaves rustling in wind. But gradually they formed into words, into voices I recognized. I heard James giving his last physics lecture. Sarah asking about heaven the night after his funeral. My mother warning me that pride comes before a fall. Rachel, the voice cut through all others, deep and resonant. Not James this time, but something older, something that made my non-existent spine tingle with recognition. You sought truth through denial. Now see truth through revelation. The darkness shifted, becoming somehow darker, heavier. I felt pressure from all sides, as if the very substance of this place was pressing in on me. I tried to scream but had no mouth. Tried to run but had no body. I was thought and awareness alone, stripped of all physical pretense. Images began to flash through my consciousness, rapid-fire visions that burned themselves into my memory. Sarah in a hospital bed, machines beeping their countdown to an end that never came. My mother on her knees in our living room, praying through the night while I slept upstairs. James, the night before his accident, writing something in his journal that I'd never thought to read. Your foundation is built on sand, the voice said. Watch it crumble. And the pressure increased until I thought I would cease to exist entirely, but instead of oblivion, revelation came. Every argument I'd ever made against faith, every logical explanation I'd given for miracles, every smug dismissal of others' experiences, they all played back before me. But now I saw what I'd missed, what I'd willfully ignored, the patterns, the purpose, the impossible coincidences that I'd explained away. Please, I tried to say, though I had no voice here, I don't understand. Understanding comes through surrender, the voice replied. You cannot grasp truth while clinging to lies. The darkness began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the ticking of that unseen clock. Each beat stripped away another layer of my carefully constructed worldview. I saw Sarah's unexplained survival not as a statistical anomaly, but as something else, something I'd refused to name. I saw James's death not as random tragedy, but as a pivot point in some vast design. Your daughter sees, the voice said. Even now she sees. Why do you blind yourself? The pressure became unbearable. I felt myself beginning to fracture, to come apart at some fundamental level. All my certainties, my intellectual pride, my carefully constructed arguments, they were ash in this place, meaningless in the face of what I was experiencing. Choose now, the voice commanded. Truth or comfort. Light or darkness. See or remain blind. In that moment, suspended in living darkness, stripped of everything I thought I knew, I made a choice that would alter not just my life but the lives of countless others. I surrendered. Show me, I whispered into the void. Please, show me what's real. The darkness shuddered. The ticking stopped. For one eternal moment, everything went still. Then light exploded around me, not gentle or warm, but searing, penetrating, impossible to deny or ignore. And in that light I began to see what was coming, what had always been coming, what Sarah had been trying to tell me. The end, the beginning. The moment when all our certainties would crumble and only truth would remain. I saw the clock. I saw the city. I saw the stars begin to fall. And through it all, I heard Sarah's voice, echoing from what felt like years in the future. Now you understand, Mommy. Now you can help them prepare. The real journey was about to begin. The light faded gradually, resolving itself into a landscape that defied everything I thought I knew about reality. I stood, though I'm not sure stood is the right word when you're dead, in what appeared to be Times Square, but not the Times Square I knew. This one was empty, the massive digital billboards dark and lifeless, the streets eerily silent. That's when I saw them, the figures in black masks moving with an unnatural grace through the abandoned streets. They emerged from the shadows between buildings, dozens of them, their featureless faces all turned toward me. I should have been terrified, but something about their movement seemed familiar. One of them stepped forward, and my non-existent heart stopped. Even with the mask, I knew him. The way he tilted his head slightly to the right when considering something, the slight favor of his left leg habits so deeply ingrained they survived even death. James, my voice sounded strange here, echoing oddly in the empty square. He raised his hands to the mask, but I stopped him. Don't, I whispered. Please, I'm not ready." "You'll never be ready, Rachel," he said, his voice both familiar and alien. "That's why this has to happen now." The other masked figures had formed a circle around us, silent witnesses to this impossible reunion. James took a step closer, and I fought the urge to step back. This wasn't the man I'd married, the father of my children. This was something else, wearing his movement, speaking with his voice. "Why are you here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why like this?" "Because you needed to see what happens when we choose darkness over light." He gestured at the empty city around us. "This is where it starts, Rachel, the great unraveling. And I'm part of it because I chose wrong. I chose pride over truth, reason over faith, darkness over light." "But you were a scientist," I protested. "You believed in facts, in evidence." "I believed in what I could measure," he corrected. "And in doing so, I missed what was immeasurable. We both did." "But Sarah," he paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Sarah sees everything." As if summoned by her name, a new sound cut through the silence, singing. Not just any singing, but a hymn I remembered from my childhood, one my mother used to sing. Amazing Grace. It echoed off the empty buildings, growing louder as its source approached. The masked figures parted, creating a path through their circle. And there she was, Sarah. But not my 9-year-old with terminal cancer. This was Sarah grown, maybe 20 years old, radiant with health and purpose. She walked with authority, leading a group of people through the abandoned streets. They all carried lanterns that gave off that same penetrating light I'd seen before. "Sarah," I called out, but she walked right through me as if I wasn't there. This was a vision, I realized, a glimpse of what was to come. "You see," James said beside me, "she survives, she leads, because she never lost her light." I watched as my daughter, my future daughter, guided her group through the ruins of New York. Despite the destruction around them, they moved with purpose and hope. Their faces were tired but determined, their eyes bright with something I'd spent years dismissing: faith. "I don't understand," I said, turning back to James. "Why show me this? Why bring me here?" "Because you're the messenger, Rachel." He reached for his mask again, and this time I didn't stop him. "You need to see who I've become to understand what's at stake." The mask came off and I screamed. The face beneath wasn't James's handsome features twisted by death. It wasn't decayed or monstrous. It was nothing. A void in the shape of a face, a darkness deeper than the space between stars. Looking at it was like falling into an endless pit, and I understood with horrible clarity what he meant about choosing darkness. "This is what happens," he said, his voice coming from that impossible void, "when we deny the light for too long, when we choose to blind ourselves to truth. I'm showing you because you're on the same path, Rachel. You're becoming this." I backed away, shaking my head. "No, I'm nothing like this. I just want the truth." "Then look," he roared, and suddenly the empty city around us burst into flames. The masked figures began to move, their fluid grace becoming predatory. Above us, the sky turned that deep, swirling red from my dream. Look at what's coming. Look at what we become when we choose darkness. In the distance, I could still hear Sarah singing, leading her people to safety. The contrast between her light and the darkness surrounding me was physically painful. "Choose," James said, reaching for me with hands that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Choose now, Rachel, before you become like me." Behind him, a massive clock began to rise from the burning street, its hands frozen at 11:59. The real test was about to begin. The clock's face cracked, a spiderweb of fissures spreading across its ancient surface. Each crack leaked golden light, the same penetrating radiance I'd seen before. James, or what had once been James, took a step back, his void face turning away from the brightness. "You don't have much time," he said, his voice distorting. "The choice must be made. The messenger must be chosen." Above us, the stars began to shake in their settings, like jewels about to fall from a broken crown. The masked figures moved restlessly, their fluid grace becoming agitated. In the distance, Sarah's singing grew fainter, but I could still make out the words. Was blind, but now I see. "What choice?" I demanded, finding strength in my daughter's voice. "What message?" "The same choice humanity has always faced." Another voice answered, the deep, resonant one from the darkness. "Light or darkness, truth or comfort, life or death." The burning city around us flickered like a film projection, momentarily replaced by another image, the same streets filled with people going about their lives, unaware of what was coming. The vision lasted only seconds before the flames returned, but it left me shaken. "They don't see," James said, gesturing at the ghostly image of the oblivious crowds. "Just like we didn't see. Someone has to tell them. Someone they'll listen to." Me, I laughed bitterly. I'm the last person they'd listen to about faith. I've spent years teaching them not to believe. Exactly, his void face turned toward me. Who better to warn them than the one who led them astray? Who better to speak of light than someone who's chosen darkness and seen its end? The clock's cracks widened, more light pouring through. The masked figures retreated from it, their movements becoming jerky, almost panicked. But James stood his ground, reaching for me again with those light-consuming hands. "Join us," he said, his voice taking on an almost pleading tone. "Stay in the darkness where it's safe, where you don't have to face what you've done, what you've led others to do." I looked at his outstretched hand, remembering all the times it had held mine. The day we met, our wedding, the birth of Sarah, the countless moments of love and companionship we'd shared. It would be so easy to take it now, to choose the comfort of darkness over the searing truth of light. But then I heard it, another voice cutting through everything else. Sarah's voice, not singing this time, but praying, "Please God, let her see. Let her understand. Don't let her choose like Daddy did." The prayer seemed to come from both the grown Sarah leading survivors and my 9-year-old fighting for life in the hospital, past and future unified in a single plea for my soul. The clock's face shattered completely, releasing a flood of light that knocked the masked figures to their knees. Only James remained standing, his hand still extended toward me. "Last chance," he said softly. "Choose your truth, Rachel. Choose your side." I looked at his empty face, finally understanding what he'd become, what I was in danger of becoming. All those years of denying the light hadn't led to enlightenment. It had hollowed us out, left us empty, wearing masks of intellectual superiority to hide the void within. "I'm sorry," I whispered, taking a step back. "I love you, James, I always will. But I choose light." The moment the words left my mouth, the golden radiance surged forward, engulfing everything. The masked figures screamed a sound of both agony and release. James's form began to dissolve, but before he disappeared completely, I caught a glimpse of his real face beneath the void, smiling, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he was gone. The light swept through the burning city like a flood, revealing the truth beneath the surface of reality. I saw scenes playing out like overlapping photographs, past, present, and future, all existing simultaneously. I saw my own body in the hospital, doctors fighting to save me. I saw Sarah, both versions of her united in prayer. I saw my mother holding my newborn second child, tears of joy mixing with tears of grief. And I saw what was coming, what had always been coming. The great unraveling, the time of choice. The moment when all our carefully constructed illusions would crumble, leaving only truth behind. The clock's broken face hung in the air before me, its hand still frozen at 11:59, but now I understood it wasn't showing the time. It was showing us how long we had left to choose. The light receded slowly, like a tide pulling back to reveal a transformed landscape. I found myself standing in what remained of Central Park, but it was unrecognizable. The trees were blackened skeletons, the grass burned away to reveal cracked earth beneath. The air itself seemed to shimmer with residual heat. Through the haze, I saw people moving, normal people, not the masked figures. They huddled in groups among the ruins, some nursing injuries, others simply staring into space with shell-shocked expressions. Children cried, their sobs echoing across the desolate park. The scene was heartbreaking, yet something about it felt incomplete, like I was seeing only part of a larger picture. "They can't see you," a familiar voice said. I turned to find an elderly woman standing beside me. It took me a moment to recognize her, my mother, but aged decades beyond her current years. Like Sarah, this was a vision of what would be. "Mom," I whispered, "but you're..." "Still praying for you," she smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "Always, Rachel. Even now. Especially now." She looked different than I remembered, stronger somehow. Her usual nervous energy had been replaced by a calm certainty that reminded me of Sarah, She wore simple clothes, torn and stained with ash, but her eyes blazed with that same penetrating light I'd seen before. "Walk with me," she said, starting down what used to be a park path. "There's more you need to see." As we walked, the scenes around us shifted like changing channels on a TV. I saw makeshift hospitals set up in the ruins of churches, survivors sharing meager supplies, people comforting strangers who had lost everything. But mixed with these moments of humanity were darker scenes: looters fighting over food, armed groups threatening the weak, people turning away those seeking help. "Every disaster shows us who we really are," my mother said, pausing to watch a young man share his last bottle of water with a crying child. "Crisis strips away pretense. What remains is truth." "But why show me this?" I asked. "What can I do about any of it?" She turned to me, her aged face serious. "Because you're going to write about it, Rachel. Not like your other books, not to tear down faith, but to prepare people, to warn them, to give them hope." "They won't believe me," I protested. "I'm the atheist author, remember? They'll say I'm crazy or lying, or..." "They'll say exactly what you used to say about others who had experiences like this," she interrupted. "And that's precisely why it has to be you. Your journey from darkness to light will be your testimony." Before I could respond, the scene changed dramatically. We were standing in a vast crowd of people, all facing a massive black obelisk that rose into the blood-red sky. The structure seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, just like James's void face had. "Watch," my mother commanded. The crowd began to kneel row by row as masked figures moved among them. But not everyone knelt. Here and there, people remained standing, their faces set with determination. As I watched, they began to glow with that same inner light I'd seen before. "The faithful," my mother explained, "those who choose light over comfort, truth over safety." The masked figures approached these glowing individuals, but couldn't seem to get close. The light held them back like an invisible barrier. More people began to stand, drawing strength from the first few, until pockets of light dotted the kneeling crowd. "This is what's coming," Rachel, my mother said. "Not just destruction, decision. Everyone will have to choose. No one will be able to stay neutral." A commotion near the obelisk caught my attention. A group of people was pushing through the crowd, led by a familiar figure, Sarah, my Sarah, grown and glowing brighter than any of the others. She carried something in her hands, a book. With a jolt, I recognized it, my second book, the one I hadn't finished. But the title was different than what I'd planned. Instead of The Death of Divinity, it read, "The Light Comes a Skeptic's Journey from Darkness to Dawn." "You see," my mother said softly, "your words will still change lives, Rachel, just not in the way you originally intended." The scene began to fade, the crowd dissolving like smoke. But before it disappeared completely, I caught a glimpse of Sarah looking directly at me, not the future Sarah leading the group, but my 9-year-old standing in the ruins of Central Park. She smiled and waved, as if she could see me perfectly. "Time to show you the hardest part," my mother said, her voice heavy with sadness. "Are you ready?" I wasn't. How could anyone be ready for what came next? But I nodded anyway. The park vanished, replaced by something much worse. The clock was back, its broken face still frozen at 11:59, but now I understood what it was counting down to. Not just destruction, decision. The moment when everyone everywhere would have to choose between light and darkness. Just like I had. Just like James hadn't. "Remember," my mother said, her form beginning to fade. "You're not just a messenger, Rachel. You're a witness. And witnesses must tell the whole truth, no matter how painful." She disappeared, leaving me alone with the broken clock and the knowledge of what I still had to see. The real horror was about to begin. The horror began with a sound, not an explosion or a scream, but a child's laughter. I turned to find myself in a school playground, the equipment still intact, swings moving gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. A group of children played while masked figures watched from the shadows, their empty faces turned toward the young ones with an intensity that made my soul recoil. "They start with the children," a new voice said. I turned to find a man standing beside me, one of the survivors from Sarah's group, but somehow I knew he was more than that. They know that if they can capture the children's minds, the parents will follow. As we watched, one of the masked figures approached the playground, holding something that glowed with a sickly green light. The children stopped playing, drawn to its radiance like moths to a flame. It wasn't the pure, penetrating light I'd seen before. This was something else, something that mimicked light but felt wrong. False miracles, the man explained. False hopes, false comfort. They offer an easier path than truth. The scene shifted and we were in a vast auditorium. On stage, a masked figure spoke to thousands, its void face projected on massive screens. The crowd hung on every word, mesmerized by promises of peace, security, and answers to life's greatest questions, all without the need for faith or moral struggle. Your books helped pave the way for this, the man said, his voice gentle but firm. Every argument against faith, every mockery of belief, every rational explanation that denied the spiritual, they were all steps toward this moment. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I saw my TED Talks playing on screens throughout the auditorium, my words weaving together with the masked figure's message. I watched as people nodded, their eyes growing distant, their faces slack with acceptance of these comfortable lies. But that's not the worst part, my guide said. Look. The scene changed again. We stood in a hospital room, Sarah's room. But instead of my daughter, another child lay in the bed, surrounded by machines. Parents stood nearby, their faces twisted with grief as a masked figure offered them something, a contract, glowing with that same sickly light. They prey on desperation, he explained, offering miracles for loyalty, healing for submission, hope for obedience. I watched in horror as the parents signed, their tears falling on the glowing document. The moment they finished, their eyes went dull and the masked figure placed its hands on their child. The machine showed improvement, but the child's eyes, when they opened, held the same emptiness I'd seen in James's void face. This is how they build their army, the man said. Not through force, but through choice. They offer what people want most: comfort, certainty, miracle cures, freedom from pain in exchange for their light. Scenes began to flash by faster, churches being converted into rationality centers, schools teaching children to reject their parents' faith, hospitals offering miraculous cures with terrible prices, all overseen by the masked figures with their empty faces and false promises. But why, I asked, my voice breaking. Why show me all this? Because you need to understand what you're fighting against, he replied. It's not just about faith versus doubt or religion versus reason. It's about truth versus comfort, light versus darkness, the hard path versus the easy one. The scene stopped shifting, settling on a familiar sight, my own office, where I'd written my books attacking faith. But now I saw what I couldn't see before: a darkness gathering in the corners, seeping into my words, spreading from there to infect my readers' minds. Your daughter, the man said, chose the harder path. Even facing death, she chose truth over comfort. That's why she glows with real light. That's why she leads others. And that's why you're here now, because you finally made the same choice. He turned to face me fully, and I gasped. His features were those of the young man who had shared his water with the crying child, but his eyes held the same penetrating light I'd seen in Sarah's. The time of comfortable lies is ending, he said. The time of hard truths is beginning. When you go back, you must tell them everything you've seen. Not just the destruction and horror, but the choice that lies at the heart of it all. But how, I asked. How can I make them understand? He smiled, and in that smile I saw echoes of every person who had ever chosen light over darkness, truth over comfort, the hard path over the easy one. By telling your story, he said, all of it, your pride, your fall, your transformation, show them that even the greatest skeptic can find light in the darkness. Show them that it's never too late to choose truth over comfort. The scene began to fade, but his words continued to echo. Show them that the light comes for everyone, but we have to choose to see it. As the world dissolved around me, I understood what I had to do. The book one would write wouldn't be an attack on faith or a defense of reason. It would be something far more dangerous, a testimony of truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. The clock's broken face appeared one last time, its hand still frozen at 11:59, waiting for humanity's choice. The real revelation was about to begin. The world reformed around me in a vast cathedral, but not one built by human hands. The walls were made of living light, the ceiling an expanse of swirling cosmos. At its center stood the clock, its broken face now large enough to fill my entire field of vision. The hands still pointed to 11:59, but now they trembled, as if fighting against some immense pressure. The masked figures surrounded me, hundreds of them, their void faces all turned toward the clock. Among them I recognized James not by any physical feature, but by the lingering echo of love that even the darkness couldn't completely erase. He stood apart from the others, his empty face turned toward me with what felt like regret. "They're coming," he said, his voice carrying both warning and longing. "The stars are about to fall." As if summoned by his words, the cosmic ceiling began to crack. Through the fissures, I saw them, the stars, but not as distant points of light. These were massive, alive, burning with a fury that made my soul quake. They weren't falling randomly, they were being aimed, like weapons. The first star struck the cathedral's floor with devastating force. The impact should have destroyed everything, but instead the light walls absorbed the blow, transforming the star's destructive energy into pure radiance. The masked figures recoiled, their fluid movements becoming jerky with what could only be fear. "Watch," a voice commanded, the deep, resonant one from before. "Watch what happens when light and darkness meet." More stars began to fall, each impact releasing waves of that penetrating light. But something else was happening too. Where the light touched the masked figures, their void faces began to crack, revealing glimpses of the human faces they'd once worn. Some fell to their knees, tears streaming from empty sockets. Others fought against the transformation, their forms twisting as they tried to hold on to the darkness. James stepped forward, his void face beginning to fragment. "Rachel," he called, his voice shifting between the hollow tone of the masked figures and his own familiar warmth. "Help me, please." I moved toward him without thinking, my hand outstretched. But before I could reach him, Sarah appeared between us, both versions of her simultaneously, the 9-year-old and the grown leader, their forms overlapping like a double exposure. "No, Mommy," they said in unison. "That's not why you're here." The clock's hand shuddered violently, and a deep gong sounded that shook the very fabric of reality. The stars were falling faster now, their impacts creating a symphony of destruction and revelation. Each blast stripped away another layer of illusion, showing the truth beneath the surface of everything. I saw my own life laid bare, every moment of pride, every dismissal of others' faith, every cruel word spoken in the name of reason. But I also saw something else, a thread of light running through it all, patiently waiting for me to notice, to understand, to choose. "The time has come," the deep voice proclaimed. "The foundation will fall. The tower will rise. But first you must witness the moment of choice." The cathedral's walls began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the trembling clock hands. The masked figures formed a circle around James, their void faces cracking, their forms wavering between darkness and light. Above us, the stars continued to fall, each impact now accompanied by a sound like breaking chains. "Help them," Sarah's voices pleaded, child and adult, present and future. "Show them it's not too late to choose." Understanding flooded through me. This wasn't just a vision of destruction, it was a vision of transformation. Each falling star was a chance for redemption, each blast of light an opportunity to choose truth over comfort, reality over illusion. James stood in the center of the circle, his void face almost completely shattered. Beneath the fragments, I could see his real face contorted in a battle between light and darkness. This was the moment, his moment of choice, played out in cosmic scale. "I'm scared," he whispered, sounding for the first time like the man I'd married. "Rachel, I'm so scared." "I know," I said, taking a step forward. "But you don't have to be. Look." I pointed to Sarah, our daughter, our miracle standing in her dual form, glowing with the light of truth. "She never stopped believing in you," I said. "Even after you chose darkness, even after you became this, she never stopped praying for you." The clock's hands moved a fraction of a millimeter, and the universe held its breath. It was time for James to choose again. Time for everyone to choose. Time for the stars to finish falling and the truth to finally break through. The climax of all things was about to begin. James raised his hands to his shattered void face, his fingers trembling. Around us, the masked figures watched in absolute stillness, their own faces cracking, revealing glimpses of the human souls trapped beneath. The stars continued to fall, each impact sending waves of transformative light through the cathedral. "I don't know how," James whispered, his voice breaking. "I've been in the darkness so long I don't remember what the light feels like." Sarah, both versions of her, stepped forward, their overlapping forms creating a radiance that made the masked figures shrink back. "Just let go, Daddy," they said in unison. "Stop fighting. Stop hiding. Just let go." He turned to me, and through the cracks in his void face, I saw his eyes, his real eyes, filled with tears and terror and hope. "Will you help me?" he asked. "Like Sarah helped you." Before I could answer, the clock's hands shuddered violently. A deep crack split the cathedral floor, and from it rose the black obelisk I'd seen before. Its surface writhed with symbols that hurt to look at, each one promising comfort, safety, and freedom from choice. No, the voice came from the obelisk, but it wasn't the deep, resonant one from before. This voice was silky, seductive, offering easy answers and comfortable lies. "You are mine. You chose darkness. You cannot unchoose." The masked figures began to move toward James, their broken faces weeping darkness. But Sarah stood firm, her light creating a barrier they couldn't cross. "That's the final lie," she said, her child and adult voices ringing with authority. "We can always choose again. Until the last star falls, we can always choose again." James looked between the obelisk and Sarah, between darkness and light, between comfort and truth. I saw the struggle playing out in every line of his being. The void face tried to reform, to cover his humanity again, but the cracks had grown too wide. "Rachel," he pleaded, reaching for me, "tell me what to do." And in that moment I understood why I was there. Not just to witness, not just to warn, but to help guide others through the same choice I had made. I took his hand, feeling the cold of the void warring with the warmth of his humanity. "Remember," I said softly, "remember the night you first held Sarah? Remember what you said when you looked into her eyes?" He gasped. Through the cracks, I saw the memory light up his face. I said, "I finally understood what a miracle looked like." "Yes," I whispered. "You knew truth then, before pride and reason made you forget. You saw light before you chose darkness. You can see it again. Just let go." The obelisk pulsed with angry power, its symbols promising everything except the one thing James needed most: freedom to choose truth over comfort. The masked figures pressed closer, their broken faces pleading, offering fellowship in darkness. But Sarah began to sing that same hymn I'd heard before, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me." Her voices, child and adult, present and future, wove together in perfect harmony. One by one, the masked figures stopped advancing. Through their broken void faces, I saw lips beginning to move, remembering words they'd tried to forget. James squeezed my hand, his grip changing from desperate to determined. He reached up with his free hand and grasped the edge of his void face. "Help me," he said. Together we pulled. The face resisted, trying to maintain its hold, but the light from the falling stars had weakened it. With a sound like breaking chains, it came free. James threw back his head and screamed a sound of pain and liberation and triumph all at once. Light poured from him, not the cold radiance of the stars, but the warm glow of reclaimed humanity. The void face in our hands crumbled to ash and blew away. The clock's hands moved another fraction, and the universe sang. The first choice had been made. The transformation had begun. But the hardest part was still to come. Because now it wasn't just about James. Now all the masked figures turned to me, their broken faces pleading for help, while the obelisk raged and the stars continued to fall. The real battle for humanity's soul was about to begin. Not all of them could be saved. That was the first painful truth I had to witness. As James stood transformed, glowing with reclaimed humanity, the other masked figures surged forward, their broken void faces revealing glimpses of the souls trapped within. But where James had chosen light, many of them chose to cling to their darkness. "Help us," they pleaded, their voices a cacophony of desperation. But when Sarah stepped forward, her light revealing the path to redemption, they recoiled. When James reached out to them, they turned away. They wanted help without change, salvation without sacrifice, light without the pain of transformation. The most devastating part was recognizing some of them. Through the cracks in their void faces, I saw people I knew, colleagues who had promoted my atheist writings, friends who had celebrated my attacks on faith, followers who had embraced my comfortable lies. From their eyes, visible through the broken masks, held recognition too. You led us here, they accused, their voices heavy with betrayal. You showed us this path. The guilt was overwhelming. They were right. I had helped create this, had given them intellectual justification for choosing darkness over light, comfort over truth. I had made their void faces seem like masks of wisdom rather than prisons of pride. One figure stepped forward, her void face barely cracked. Through the fissures, I recognized Dr. Emily Chin, my closest friend and fellow atheist author. "Remember what you wrote," she said, her voice shifting between hollow and human. "Faith is the refuge of those too weak to face reality. Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" Before I could answer, the stars began to fall again, faster and more devastating than before. But now I saw something I'd missed earlier. Each star was aimed at someone specific, offering one last chance at transformation. Some struck their targets and broke through, releasing trapped souls in explosions of light. Others were deflected by choice, the masked figures actively rejecting their chance at redemption. Emily raised her hands to shield herself from an approaching star. "I won't let you blind me with false hope," she declared. The star struck her but didn't break through. Instead, her void face sealed its cracks, becoming smoother and more complete than before. One by one, I watched as people I had known, taught, influenced, made their final choices. Some, like James, embraced the transformative light, but far more chose to repair their masks, to retreat into the comfort of darkness. Mommy Sarah's voice is called child and adult, filled with sadness. You can't save everyone. Some have to choose the darkness so others can see the cost. The clock's hands trembled again as the cathedral began to crumble. The black obelisk grew taller, feeding on each soul that chose darkness. Those who had sealed their masks moved toward it like moths to a flame, their movements becoming more fluid, more inhuman with each step. "Take comfort in lies," the obelisk's voice boomed. "Find peace in darkness. Embrace the void where no choice is needed, no truth demands sacrifice." James stood beside me, his restored face wet with tears as he watched his former companions surrender to the darkness he had escaped. "I led some of them here," he whispered. When I wore the mask, I convinced them to choose comfort over truth." "We both did," I replied, watching as Emily and others I had influenced merged with the obelisk's base, their forms becoming one with its dark surface. Our pride, our certainty, our comfortable lies. We made the darkness seem wise. Above us, the cosmic ceiling continued to crack, more stars falling like judgment. Each one offered a chance at redemption, and each rejection made the obelisk grow stronger. The tragedy wasn't that they couldn't be saved, it was that they didn't want to be. The clock's face cracked further, its hands edging closer to midnight. Time was running out, not just for them, but for everyone. The tragedy I was witnessing was just the beginning. The real horror was yet to come. The cathedral's light walls began to flicker and fade as more masked figures merged with the obelisk. Each lost soul made the darkness stronger, and with every rejection of light, I felt the weight of my responsibility grow heavier. These were more than just anonymous figures. Now they were people I had influenced, minds I had helped shape with my writings and lectures. Through the cracks in their void faces, I saw reporters who had promoted my books, students who had cheered my debates against religious leaders, followers who had built their lives around the comfortable lies I'd taught them. One by one, they chose to repair their masks rather than face the truth they'd glimpsed through the cracks. But the deepest cut came when I recognized another figure, Thomas, my literary agent, the man who had helped make me America's most notorious atheist. His void face was almost completely shattered, revealing the torment beneath. "You can't abandon us," he pleaded, his voice echoing with both human desperation and void hollow emptiness. "We built an empire on reason, on logic, on freedom from the burden of faith. Was it all a lie?" "No," I said, reaching for him. "It was just incomplete. We thought we were bringing light, but we were only painting darkness to look bright." A star plummeted toward him, its light offering transformation. For a moment I saw hope in his exposed human eyes. But then he looked at the obelisk, at the comfort it promised, at the freedom from choice it offered. "I can't," he whispered. "The light, it hurts too much." Before I could stop him, he pressed the fragments of his void face back together, sealing himself in darkness. The star struck him but bounced away, its light rejected. Thomas turned and walked toward the obelisk, his movements becoming fluid and inhuman as he merged with its base. James gripped my hand as we watched more of our former followers choose darkness. "We have to let them go," he said, though his voice broke with each word. "Free will means the freedom to choose wrong." Sarah, both versions of her, stood before the remaining masked figures, her light offering them one last chance. "The truth will set you free," her voices rang out, "but first it will make you hurt." Some stepped forward, reaching for their broken void faces with trembling hands. But most backed away, choosing the obelisk's promises over the pain of transformation. The tragedy wasn't in their inability to change, it was in their unwillingness to endure the discomfort that change required. The clock's hands shuddered again, moving another fraction toward midnight. With each movement, the stars fell faster, their light more intense. But the obelisk grew stronger too, fed by every soul that chose darkness over truth. "Remember this," the deep voice commanded. "Remember their choices. Remember the cost of comfortable lies." I watched as the last of my former followers made their decisions. Some joined us in the light, their faces transformed by tears of both pain and joy. But far more chose to repair their masks and merge with the obelisk. The cathedral began to collapse around us as the final choices were made. The light walls crumbled, revealing the burning city beyond. In the distance I could hear screams not of pain, but of people facing the moment of choice, of comfortable lies being stripped away to reveal hard truths. "It's time," Sarah said, her child and adult forms beginning to separate. "The real tragedy is about to begin." The clock's face cracked completely, its hands trembling on the edge of midnight. The stars continued to fall, but now they weren't just offering transformation, they were bringing judgment. The tragedy I had witnessed was personal, but what was coming would shake the foundations of the world. The cathedral's collapse revealed not just the burning city, but the truth beneath all reality. As the light walls crumbled, I saw layers of existence peeling away like pages in a book. Each layer showed the same scene from a different perspective: physical, spiritual, eternal, all happening simultaneously. Now you see, the deep voice resonated, what has always been. The choice between light and darkness isn't new, it's the only choice that has ever mattered. Through these overlapping layers of reality, I watched humanity's story unfold all at once. Every moment of decision, every battle between truth and comfort, every choice between light and darkness, they were all the same choice, repeated across time and space. The masked figures in the obelisk were just the latest manifestation of an eternal struggle. "Look closer," Sarah commanded, her child and adult voices carrying power that shook the remaining cathedral walls. "See what your books were really part of." The scene shifted, focusing on libraries, universities, screens, and minds. I saw my words, my carefully crafted arguments against faith, weaving through history like dark threads, joining with older threads of doubt, pride, and comfortable lies. But I also saw other threads, bright ones, weaving patterns of truth and hope through the darkness. "Your daughter," James said beside me, his restored face radiant. "She was never just fighting cancer. She was fighting this." He gestured at the dark threads, at the patterns of doubt and despair they created. Every time she chose faith over fear, light over darkness, she was unraveling what we had helped weave. The revelation hit me with physical force: Sarah's unexplained survival, her mysterious conversations with James, her drawings of what was to come. They weren't coincidences or hallucinations. She had been chosen as a counter to my influence, a light to balance my darkness. But why, I asked, watching the pattern shift and change? Why her? Why us? Because sometimes, the deep voice answered, the greatest light comes from those who have known the deepest darkness. Your family's story, the atheist author, the scientist who denied miracles, and the child who proved you both wrong. It's more than just your story. The layers of reality continued to peel back, showing me more. I saw others like us scattered through time, doubters transformed into believers, skeptics turned into prophets, those who had chosen darkness becoming champions of light. Each story was unique, yet part of the same eternal pattern. "This is your real testimony," Sarah said, her forms beginning to merge again. "Not just what you saw when you died, but what you understand now. Every soul faces this choice, and no choice is final until the last star falls." The clock's hands trembled again, nearly touching midnight. Through the layers of reality, I saw the consequences of each tick soul's choosing light or darkness, comfort or truth, easy lies or difficult honesty. The pattern was building toward something, a culmination that would shake the foundations of existence. The obelisk, James said, pointing to where it rose through all layers of reality. It's not just a building, it's every tower of pride humanity has ever built, every monument to our attempt to avoid the choice between light and darkness. I saw he was right. Through the overlapping layers, the obelisk was simultaneously the Tower of Babel, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the great lighthouses and temples and skyscrapers, every structure humans had built to prove we could reach heaven without having to choose light over darkness. Now you understand, the deep voice proclaimed. Now you can tell them. Not just about what's coming, but about what has always been. The choice, the pattern, the truth. The final layers of reality peeled away, revealing the ultimate truth. There were only ever two paths: light and darkness, truth and comfort, transformation and stagnation. Everything else was detail. The clock hands shuddered one last time, and the universe held its breath. The revelation was complete. The truth was unveiled. But the final choice was still to come. The final revelation came not in visions of cosmic scale, but in the smallest, most personal details. As the layers of reality settled around us, I saw moments from my own life replayed with new clarity. Every time I'd dismissed a coincidence, every logical explanation I'd given for miraculous events, they were all moments when I'd actively chosen darkness over light. "Watch," Sarah said, her merged form glowing brighter. "See what you couldn't see before." The scene shifted to my hospital room, where my physical body lay suspended between life and death. But now I saw what was really happening there. My mother wasn't just praying, her words were creating ripples in reality, waves of light that pushed back against encroaching darkness. Sarah wasn't just holding my hand, she was anchoring my soul to the light, preventing the void face I'd been crafting for years from fully forming. "Your mother never stopped praying for you," James said softly. "Even when you mocked her faith, even when you wrote articles ridiculing prayer, she kept choosing light over comfort. She could have had an easier relationship with you if she'd kept quiet, but she chose truth instead." I saw all the times she'd spoken up, all the gentle corrections and persistent prayers that I'd dismissed as naive superstition. Each one was a tiny battle in the eternal war between light and darkness, and she'd never once chosen the easy path of silence. And Sarah, the deep voice added, she was given a choice too. Her illness wasn't random, it was a battlefield. Every time the doctors predicted her death, she had to choose between fear and faith, between darkness and light. The scene shifted to Sarah's hospital room, but now I saw what had really been happening during those long nights. When she said she was talking to James, she really was. When she drew pictures of what was coming, she was recording visions as real as what I was seeing now. Her unexplained survival wasn't a medical mystery, it was a testament to repeated choices for light over darkness. "Even your pregnancy," James said, gesturing to my body in the hospital. It wasn't unplanned in the eternal sense. "The new life within you is part of the pattern, another chance for humanity to choose light." The truth hit me with stunning clarity. There were no coincidences, no random events, no meaningless moments. Every instance was a choice. Every decision a battle, every soul a crucial player in the eternal struggle between light and darkness. "This is what you have to tell them," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of both child and prophet. "Not just about the destruction to come, but about the choice that faces each soul in every moment. The clock isn't just counting down to an event, it's counting the moments until everyone must choose consciously what they've been choosing unconsciously all along." The clock's hands trembled again, and through its cracked face I saw the pattern of all reality, an endless series of choices between truth and comfort, between the easy darkness of denial and the challenging light of acceptance. "Your books," James said, "they can still change the world. Not by tearing down faith, but by showing the cost of choosing darkness. Your story, our story, it's a map for others who will face the same choice." The final truth settled over me like a mantle. I hadn't been chosen to be a prophet of doom, but a witness to hope. The testimony I would give wasn't just about destruction and judgment, but about the possibility of transformation until the very last moment. The clock's hands moved again, nearly touching midnight. The stars continued to fall, offering final chances for choice. The obelisk rose higher, promising comfort to those who would deny the need to choose. But now I really understood what Sarah had been trying to tell me all along. The light comes for everyone, but we have to choose to see it. And that choice is available until the last star falls, until the final tick of the clock, until the very end of all things. The truth was complete. The revelation was fulfilled. The real test was about to begin. The return to life wasn't gentle. One moment I was standing in the cosmic cathedral, witnessing the eternal pattern of choice between light and darkness. The next I was gasping on the hospital bed, my body fighting for air as doctors and nurses rushed around me. "She's back," someone shouted. "Pulse is stabilizing." My eyes searched frantically through the chaos, finding what mattered most: Sarah, still standing where she'd been before my death, still holding my hand, still smiling that knowing smile. Behind her, my mother had tears streaming down her face as she whispered prayers of thanksgiving. The baby I managed to croak. "She's perfect," my mother said, stepping forward with a tiny bundle. "Born while you were away. 7 pounds, 6 ounces of pure miracle." As they placed my newborn daughter in my arms, I saw what they couldn't: a soft glow emanating from her, the same light I'd witnessed in my vision. I named her Grace, understanding now that she was more than just my second child. She was a sign, a reminder, a living testimony of hope. Sarah climbed onto the bed beside me, her small body curling around her new sister. "Did you see, Mommy?" she whispered. "Did you understand?" I looked at my daughter, my terminally ill daughter who somehow kept living, who had been chosen as a beacon of light in the coming darkness. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied. "I saw everything. I understand now." The clock on the hospital wall read 12. I had been dead for exactly 2 minutes, but those minutes had contained eternity. Through my tears, I could still see the layers of reality, the eternal pattern of choices, the constant battle between light and darkness playing out in every heart. James was gone, at least in the physical sense, but his presence remained, purified and transformed. My mother's prayers had weight now, creating ripples in reality that I could finally perceive. And my newborn daughter glowed with purpose, just like her sister. The world outside my hospital room was unchanged for now. People still rushed through their lives, making choices they didn't realize were eternal. The great unraveling hadn't begun yet, but it would. The stars would fall. The choices would become conscious. The comfortable lies would crumble. But now I knew my role, not just as a witness to what was coming, but as a guide for those who would have to choose. My story, our family's story, would be a beacon for others facing the same decision between light and darkness. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Time to write a new book, Mommy." I nodded, understanding that my real work was just beginning. 1 year has passed since that day in the hospital. My new book, The Light Comes: A Skeptic's Journey from Darkness to Dawn, sits at the top of the bestseller lists, but not for the reasons my previous books did. This time, I'm not tearing down faith, I'm offering hope to those who will soon have to choose between light and darkness. Sarah continues to defy medical expectations. Her cancer hasn't just stopped progressing, it's retreating in ways the doctors can't explain. But I understand now. Each day she chooses light is another small victory in an eternal battle. She still draws pictures of what's coming, but now they show more than just destruction, they show the path through it. Grace, my miracle baby, grows stronger every day. Her laugh carries echoes of that penetrating light I witnessed, and sometimes when she sleeps I see her glowing with purpose. She and Sarah share a bond that goes beyond typical sisters. They're both warriors in the coming battle, each in their own way. My mother lives with us now. We pray together every morning, our words creating ripples in reality that I can still perceive. Sometimes in quiet moments I catch glimpses of James, not as the masked figure he became, but as the transformed soul he chose to be. He watches over our daughters, his presence a reminder that it's never too late to choose light over darkness. The clock is still ticking. The stars haven't begun to fall, not yet, but the signs are there for those who know how to read them. The comfortable lies are beginning to crack. The void faces are forming. The obelisk rises in shadow, waiting for those who will choose darkness over truth. But there's hope. Every day I receive letters from readers who recognize their own battles in my story. Former skeptics who feel the first stirrings of faith. religious people who finally understand why their prayers matter. Souls standing at the crossroads between light and darkness, choosing truth over comfort. I still see the layers, sometimes reality peeling back to reveal the eternal pattern beneath. In those moments I watch my daughters glowing with purpose, their lives weaving bright threads through the tapestry of what's to come. They are the future I glimpsed in my vision, the light that will guide others when the stars begin to fall. The clock in my office reads 11:59. Soon it will strike midnight, not just for me or my family, but for all humanity. The great choice is coming, the moment when each soul must decide between light and darkness, truth and comfort, transformation and stagnation. But until then, we prepare, we pray. We choose light in small moments so we'll be ready for the big ones. And we share our story not to frighten, but to offer hope. Because the truth I learned in those 2 minutes of death is simple: the light comes for everyone. We just have to choose to see it. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey of faith and transformation. If this story has touched your heart or made you think differently about your own choices between light and darkness, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear about your experiences and perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of faith, hope, and redemption. By hitting that like button, you help us reach more people who might need to hear this message. Share this video with your friends and family. Someone in your life might be searching for exactly this kind of testimony. Together we can spread the light. Remember, it's never too late to choose truth over comfort. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next video.